One representative emailed like, we can get you in at 2.
And I wasn't supposed to like read it, so I hide under my bed. Which is probably the grandest night I've ever had. Oh, right, yeah. Don't read the book. I guess that was my rebellious one.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I am going to ask Linda Thompson to come and welcome us into this space together.
Welcome. This is a prayer for unity. However you pray or however you speak, in either to the level of higher consciousness or to a creator, how you know that energy. Some people call that Gichimanidu, some people call that energy Wakantaka, some people call that energy Heavenly Father. Creator God, we come together today as organizations who work on behalf of the most vulnerable, victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, and child abuse. We come together to be reminded of the life-saving nature of our work. We come together to advocate for the dignity and the rights of victims with heartfelt pleas that they are not to be forgotten in the turmoil of recent days. We come together to stand side by side in solidarity, and we raise our voices in unison to say that violence in any form, physical, sexual, emotional, and spiritual, is wrong. And we must rise up to both end it and prevent it from happening. When one of us is violated, we are all violated. Because our liberation as human beings is bound up with one another. We come together today to be encouraged, to kindle hope, and to renew our commitment to our common cause. We ask that we be given the courage and the strength to continue to do this work in unity and in a good way. Miigwech Padamaya, amen. I'd like to introduce Cinnamon Banky, the Executive Director of Mending the Sacred Hoop Coalition.
Welcome and thank you for this honor to share this time together. I'm hopeful that you all had time here with your legislators and to share what your needs are locally. I'm a daughter, a granddaughter, a mother, a sister, and a survivor. I'm Bede Wakatin, Dakota. I look at this crowd and I can only guess how many of you have experienced domestic or sexual violence in your life, or know a friend or a relative that have. According to the National Institute of Justice, 56% of American Indian, Alaska Native women have experienced domestic and sexual violence. 28% of our Native men have experienced sexual violence, and 43% domestic violence. We look at the impact of this violence. We have 66.5% of women and 26% of our men were concerned for their safety from their partners. 92.6% of women and 74.3% of men had talked to someone about their perpetrator and what they had done. And 49% of women, 19% of men needed services for what had happened to them and what their perpetrator did. We go back a couple years to between 20 and 2021 and 2022, 5,023 American Indian relatives have officially gone missing in the United States of America. We are the wealthiest country in the United States. How do these high numbers even continue to happen? I can't imagine what it would be like without the funds and the support services that we have. We look at if programs were no longer able to take walk-ins or crisis calls at the same capacity. Volunteers are being utilized, but work heavy and unsustainable. Services are in demand and understaffed with significant lower pay. Some have stopped running support services just to maintain and support those victims throughout their court process or throughout getting back on their feet. The basic livelihood to maintain a job and walk through life daily, nurturing your children, maintaining your household, with dealing with domestic and sexual violence. Our children and grandchildren deserve to walk through life in the richest country in the world safely. In this moment, together, we need to be united, ensuring that we are protecting our relatives and ensuring their safety and those that come after us. What better way to honor our relatives and ensure that safety, holding offenders accountable, than to increase that access for programs, especially for those in rural and reservation areas? At what point are we okay to accept domestic and sexual violence? And we need to be there for those survivors until we can no longer be there, right? So we're going to educate anyone that will listen. No one is immune, not your age, your race, the size of your wallet. It does not matter. No one is immune. We need the support and leadership of Congress, who have relatives that have survived themselves, to ensure survivors of domestic and sexual violence will have a place to go when they need that support. Thank you to our legislators for supporting this critical effort to ensure safety of our relatives and those that come after. Thank you. And we have Representative Mueller. Thank you. Padamia.
Hello, everybody. I am Representative Kelly Moeller. I represent District 40A, Arden Hills, Mounds View, Shoreview, and New Brighton. This is my fourth term in the legislature, and when I'm not doing this work, I'm a prosecutor. I've had a strong emphasis on gender-based violence for over 20 years, and frankly, it's the reason why I ran for office. Back before the 2016 election, when I heard Donald Trump bragging about sexual assault, and I could not believe our country voted for somebody who said that, and I thought that we had come a lot farther than we had come, I decided to become more active. I wasn't involved in politics at all, and actually was a former executive director of the Minnesota Alliance on Crime, the General Crime Victim Coalition, and I was just so outraged by that. That a lot of people in my life said you should consider running for office. So I did. I ran, I won, I flipped a seat, And here I am today leading the Public Safety Committee for the Democrats, the former chair. And I continue to care deeply about victim services. I understand the critical and important work that victim advocates do, not only for the victim survivors that you work with, but for public safety for the state as a whole. And normally at this time, I would talk about some of the things that we've done in the past and some of the great work we've had and some bipartisan work, things that we want to do this year. But you're going to hear me unfiltered today because I am pissed off. I am so angry that there are cuts at the federal level. We were already suffering with victim services with the VOCA funding that was cut, which we were told would be temporary. We were already struggling with that, and we were trying to plug holes at the state level. On top of that, not getting funded again, Trump and the Republicans in Congress are talking about even more cuts. I saw that the Office of Violence Against Women, they talked about cuts this weekend. I heard that the military is going to stop doing training about sexual assault and sexual harassment. Do any of you know what the SAVE Act is right now in Congress? The SAVE Act is going to make it harder for women and others who have married and changed their names. It's going to make it harder for us to vote. There is an attack on women right now. And I'm pissed, and I hope you're pissed too. There's an attack on our reproductive freedom, our ability to be who we are and love who we want to love. At the same time, there's an attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and on our trans community. And all of these things are coming together to mean that women are being attacked, and especially women of color, our indigenous communities are going to feel the brunt of this the most, our trans communities. So do you remember how mad we were when we had the Me Too movement last time? Right. Yes? Anybody? Were you mad then? Are you still mad? All right. So what we need you to do about this is to not stop talking about it. This means calling our senators, calling your Congress people, emailing your legislators over and over and over again. And the most impactful emails and calls are the ones where you tell your personal story or a friend's story, where you're not just doing like a cut and paste email. Just put a little bit of personality into that. Please, we need to be hearing from you. And I don't know what we call this new movement, us now, hashtag us now, listen to us. I don't know what we call it, but we have to be loud. We are angry, we have to stay loud, and we have to fight for the services that victim survivors need. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cassie Deibler. I am the director at North Star Family Advocacy Center. We're located just in Bram, an hour north of here. And I have the privilege of talking a little bit about child advocacy centers and their importance to public safety. But what I first want to do is I want to introduce you guys to 9-year-old Penelope. It's the late 1990s, and Penelope is sexually assaulted by her 16-year-old babysitter, who also happens to be her neighbor. Penelope did a really brave thing and told her mom as soon as she got home. So we don't see that a lot in our cases. We see a lot of delays. Penelope was brought down to the police station. Just imagine being in a cold, dark room, barely being able to see over the table. And then having 2 male officers across the table questioning her about what has happened. After this interview, nothing happened to the babysitter, and Penelope had to continue living next door to this person, all the while being bullied and also not having any resources for her or her young mother. Ultimately, her family did move from that area, but that wasn't the end of her story. She would go on to be victimized 2 other times by 2 other offenders before she was 18. So, conducting an interview with a victim is a statutory requirement that is required of all investigations. So at our CAC at North Star, our mission is to listen to, connect with, and support victims, children victims, and their families. We do this by providing a child-friendly, trauma-informed, and safe space to share their experience with a forensically trained interviewer. Remember Penelope's first experience? I will tell you that when she was re-victimized, because of that experience, she never told again. We also work as a multidisciplinary team, so we're bringing law enforcement, child protection, and the county attorney's office to each interview, so that child only has to talk to that interviewer rather than all of those entities separately. We also provide medical and mental health as needed. Another core service that we do offer is advocacy, and that's for both the child and the non-offending caregiver. Advocates serve as a support system. They update families on criminal proceedings, and they provide resources for mental health services and provide trauma screenings. So unlike our partners who very likely are tied to timelines, our advocates can work with victims and their families for a lifetime if they want to. So statistically speaking, when a child is victimized, their chance of re-victimization increases. So in Penelope's experience, what a difference an advocate could have made for both her and her young mother. One other way CACs help contribute to public safety is by providing education to children in schools through programming, as well as our MDT partners in various topics surrounding child abuse, and thanks to our powerhouses, First Witness and Corner House, best practices in forensic interviewing. Many of the CACs in Minnesota are funded by federal and state grants, and a majority of that funding is what helps us survive. Without these funding sources, our child advocacy centers wouldn't survive, and the services we provide to children and their families would cease to exist. Many of our CACs have been faced with the same or cuts in funding over the last few years, even though services have grown. It is so vital to continue supporting our child advocacy centers across the state so that our victims receive all the services that they so desperately need. I do want you to know that we do survive. Penelope is now a director at a child advocacy center in Minnesota. Thank you.
Hi, look at these beautiful people. Hi, look. Look at my red jeans. I wore these for a very specific reason. You'll remember me. You may not remember my name or where I'm from, but you will remember me, the woman with the red jeans and the matching red glasses. My name is Katie. I work at Think Self, Minnesota Deaf Adult Education and Advocacy as the advocacy coordinator. I started my conversation with you in a very abrupt way, as I am naturally dramatic, but I wanted to call your attention to a serious issue. My community is facing a very real problem of invisibility. Deaf, deafblind, late deafened, deaf disabled, and hard of hearing people experience abuse at twice the rate of our hearing peers. We face the issue of being expensive people to serve because interpreters are not free. We are told that our language is not a real one, and we must accommodate those who do not understand it. We, in time of our greatest need for public servants to protect us, are often pushed aside so they can go talk directly to the person that may very well be our abuser, simply because they can easily communicate with them. There is not enough support in law, policy building, and funding. The deaf community needs your support to ensure access, protection, and language rights. Legislature has the power to change policy, fund services, and make sure deaf survivors are safe. Remember, deafness does not discriminate. Deaf people can be found in every aspect of the human experience. So, when you see me, you'll remember my red jeans and red glasses, You'll remember that I work with deaf people who are experiencing harm and abuse. And you'll remember the reason I'm there is because people in this community are not getting the services they deserve because of its expense that a privileged many cannot comprehend. I hope for community's sake you'll remember me for a reason other than the ones I just shared with you and reach out to us at Think Self with an open mind and desire to engage. Until then, I'll wear the brightest jeans and matching glasses possible to remind you that I am an essential worker who must fill the gaps that are perpetuated when profit and expense are put above the needs of the people. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire Umu-Verbaeten. I have the honor of representing District 66 in the Minnesota Senate. That includes parts of St. Paul, Roseville, Falcon Heights, and Lauderdale. I also serve as an assistant majority leader for our Senate DFL caucus and as vice chair of the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. And I want to start by thanking many of you for joining us in committee today to talk about these crucial services and to share just the situation we're in, where we are facing devastating cuts from the federal government. Thank you for being at the Capitol today to make your voices heard. This is such a critical time for crime victim services. The DFL-led legislature invested heavily in crime victim services funding. We put tens of millions of dollars there, and yet we know the need is still so great, especially when we are facing these absolutely cruel and devastating cuts from the federal government right now. I'm so proud to be the author of the bill to fund crime victim services in the Senate. And I'm honored to carry that because I know that funding for these services is vital to safety and to well-being of victims, survivors, and their families, and really society as a whole. I am proud to be an advocate for this, but I want you to know that you have a lot of advocates here, especially in the Senate DFL. You've got advocates like Senator Westland, who's here with us today. And like Senator Kunish, who you'll hear from in a moment. Yes, please give it up for these amazing, amazing, powerful women that I get to serve with in the Senate. So many of us have been personally impacted by domestic and sexual violence. I know we have survivors here in the room and loved ones of survivors. I attended the Violence Free Minnesota Intimate Partner Homicide Memorial just a few weeks ago. And, you know, we were honoring the lives of those that were lost in the last year. I want you to know how important it is to keep sharing your stories. Share those with us as legislators. As Chair Mueller said, call us, email us, call your representatives in Congress as well. Let them know how crucial this funding is. And I just want to say thank you for your work and for your advocacy. Thank you for sharing your stories. They are so powerful. Thank you for being there for people during some of the worst times in their lives. And ultimately, thank you for saving lives. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Bush. I am the Community Engagement and Outreach Manager for Missions Inc. programs. We provide housing, emergency shelter, and supportive services to domestic abuse survivors and those seeking recovery from substance use disorders. I want to begin by acknowledging the incredible strength and power present here in this room. I know that many individuals get involved in this movement after experiencing violence personally. And I want to honor you for the incredible courage it takes to turn something that never should have happened to you into a force for good in the world. I was asked to speak today about the crucial role crime victim services play in our public safety system. For many years, domestic violence, sexual violence, and child abuse were treated as private individual or family issues. Neighbors and friends would say, "What a horrible thing to happen, but it has nothing to do with me." We know now that that isn't true. Violence Free Minnesota recently published their annual Intimate Partner Homicide Report. In 2023, there were 40 confirmed victims of intimate partner homicide in Minnesota. Of those 40 victims, at least 11 were bystanders, meaning first responders, family, friends, and strangers who sought to intervene or were simply in proximity. These private acts of violence spill out into our community, impacting everyone's safety. While homicides are often the most visible and extreme form of violence, everyday acts of violence threaten the safety and well-being of our community as well. In addition to the human cost, there's a significant economic cost. A 2018 analysis of the U.S. National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey showed that the estimated lifetime cost of intimate partner violence was $103,767 per female victim and $23,414 per male victim, which includes medical cost, lost productivity, criminal justice activities, and property loss. When survivors receive immediate and ongoing support from advocates to access health care, get or keep employment, or pursue their education, we all benefit. On a state level, in 2022, Ohio estimated that for every survivor sheltered, the community and survivor can expect to see over $6,000 in short-term savings. Just as whole communities are impacted by domestic violence, sexual violence, and child abuse, our whole community is safer when these crimes are prevented when possible and responsibly and compassionately responded to when they happen. Crime victim advocates are an essential part of our public safety system. Not only do they provide immediate support and safety for victims after a violent incident, they also help prevent violence by assisting clients in filing orders for protection, helping to navigate the family court system to protect children from abusive parents, and empowering clients to build safer and more stable lives. While first responders address an immediate crisis and the criminal legal system seeks to hold offenders accountable, crime victim advocates walk alongside survivors, sometimes for years, as they heal and rebuild their lives. Few other public safety functions are as long-term or as focused on what victims want and need. These crucial support functions don't just happen. Advocates work hard every day to ensure that survivors have access to the supports that they need, and they deserve to be fairly compensated for that work. The fact that ongoing state funding for crime victim services hasn't increased in almost a decade has created an unsustainable situation where programs' budgets are stretched to the breaking point, unable to pay competitive wages for talented and qualified advocates, and unable to pursue innovative expansions in services. Importantly, many advocates providing life-saving services are survivors themselves. If we seek to empower survivors to pursue safe and stable lives, we need to start within our own organizations and staff. That is why all 6 crime victim service coalitions are here today to request an increase in ongoing funding for crime victim services across the state. We know that our services save lives, and we need to invest in the people who make those services possible. We cannot continue to ask survivors who choose to turn their experience into expertise to do more with less. We ask that our legislators recognize the vital nature of this work and support a long-needed increase in ongoing funding. Thank you.
Well, hihane washte, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm State Senator Mary Kunish. Matakiape and Petukinle Shante washte. I would like to welcome you all with a good heart and a warm handshake. I am the descendant of a long line of strong Lakota women, and it is because of the work of my ancestors that I am doing the work that I have been called to do. I really do believe that. I'm proud to do this work for my ancestors and for all of you, for my daughters, for my granddaughters, and for the next 7 generations. I want to thank you. I really want to begin by thanking all of you that are here today. Some of you traveled quite far to be here, and I love to see your bright, shining faces in a moment that we talk about violence. But it is your encouragement, it is the fact that you are all here today that gives us the power and the energy to do the work that we do. I also want to thank the incredible work of these 6 anti-violence coalitions, the Minnesota Children's Alliance, Violence Free Minnesota, the Minnesota Alliance on Crime, the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and 2 of the organizations that were part of the kind of life-changing task force, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force, Mending the Sacred Hoop, and Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. They all deserve the most appreciation and applause and attention that we can ever give them. Because we know that the highest rates of violence for our American Indian women is well known within our own communities, and for generation after generation, it was a hidden story. It was a hidden trauma, and the violence that was happening was never spoke of. But it feels so good to be able to share this trauma with all of you in a way that's going to have positive outcome. I am still in delighted disbelief that the first in the nation bill that I sponsored, the Task Force on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women in Minnesota, was able to conclude with such tangible, life-changing recommendations. And as a result of that task force, those findings and the next step, I, along with all of you and the community and the organizations that are here today, quickly turned around and created the first in the nation Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office. And we continue. This allows us to continue to address this horrific generational violence. As a result of the work that we did in those 2 areas, the task force and the permanent office of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives, we then created also the task force for African American women and created that permanent office. Both of these are the leading programs, the first in the nation that many other states are trying to duplicate. I'd like to also invite you to pay attention to license plates out there in Minnesota. Look for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relative license plate, because this not only provides awareness and education around this historic trauma, but it also is generating thousands of dollars that will go directly to that office to do the work that they do. I have to tell you that the MMIR license plate is the second most requested license plate. It has generated over $90,000 for that office. Part of the work that we do here at the legislature is to educate our legislators, to educate communities, but also to educate greater Minnesota. So I hope that you start looking at some of those digital billboards that are out there. There are 7 of them that came out this summer. They're live billboards featuring some of the our missing ancestors that have been missing for the longest time. And I've had so many people in response ask me questions about that. Education is key. Now, but we're here to learn more about the community servers, and please take time to acknowledge how each one of these services provide the community and contribute to our public safety by helping victims recover and reintegrate into our communities. Victim services are so crucial as they contribute to the public safety by providing vital support to crime victims, allowing them to heal from trauma, rebuild their lives, and reintegrate into their communities, which then reduces the likelihood of further victimization and promotes a safer environment for everyone. These valuable organizations are doing this by offering immediate crisis intervention, counseling, legal assistance, housing supports, and access to community resource, ultimately fostering a sense of stability and security among victims and their families. It is absolutely true that victim services enhance individual and community safety, like by offering immediate crisis intervention and ongoing therapy. Victim services to help individual process the psychological impacts of the crimes that are perpetuated upon them, reducing the risk of long-term mental health issues that could lead to further vulnerability or risky behavior, but also interrupting the generational trauma that is handed down, not just from individual to individual, but also epigenetically. We carry this trauma with us as we create the next generation, and we have to interrupt that. When supports around basic needs like housing, employment assistance, and financial aid are provided to victims, it surely stabilizes their lives and helps with the re-engagement into their communities while reducing isolation and the potential for further victimization. We all know that the criminal justice process has never been a friend to our Indigenous communities, to our communities of color, to our LGBTQ two-spirit communities. And the services that all of these organizations provide, again, interrupt that and provide vital services. So it is through those preventative measures like addressing the root causes of victimization with community outreach and education programs, victim services such as the ones these orgs provide, that we work to proactively prevent further crimes. We find ourselves, and you've heard this time again, we find ourselves in a very, very scary situation with the new administration in Washington, D.C., and the dismantling of services and support at the federal level. I have to tell you, we are terrified. And while we hear not to worry, things will sort them out, don't be too concerned right now, we are 100% concerned. I am the chair of Education Finance in the Minnesota Senate. I have no idea how to create our next budget because we don't know if we are going to have those dollars next week, in 2 weeks, in 2 months, in 2 years. We don't know, and that is part of the whole process of legislating by chaos at the federal level. This past Thursday, on February 6th, the Federal Office on Violence Against Women has withdrawn notice for funding opportunities for this year, 2025. So immediately, we are feeling those effects. As a reminder, VAWA, first signed into law in 1994, the Violence Against Women Act brought crimes that flourish in secrecy, such as domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, into the light of day. It was reauthorized and funded by Congress in 2022. It is up for renewal every 5 years, so the next time that it needs to be renewed is in 2027, right in the middle of this administration. If you're like me, you should be alarmed. What do the grants that come out of VAWA do? It funds the National Domestic Violence Hotline that fields over 3,000 calls every single day across this nation. It requires that protection orders be upheld and enforced across state lines. What happens if those rules and those laws go away? It funds sexual assault forensic examination and rape crisis centers. We know how many of those rape kits or rape incidences were left on a shelf, not investigated, not taken care of. There is so much that it does. These funds are critical, and without the protections and the resources, more people will be harmed and murdered without them. So you ask yourself, what can I do? You can join me in contacting your congressional representatives about these issues. Tell them to release the VAWA funding that Congress has already authorized and continue to fund support grants. And then get on board in that renewal for 2027. Your Congress people are Brad Feinstead, Angie Craig, Kelly Morrison, Betty McCullum, Ilhan Omar, and Tom Emmer. It is your responsibility and those that you can to reach out to these congressional members, but it doesn't just stop there. Contact your local authorities, your mayors, your city council, your county commissioners. Call your local police and the sheriffs. Remind them of their responsibility to our communities. Educate them on the fact that sexual violence begins early and has those lifelong consequences. They all share the responsibility to protect and support our most vulnerable Minnesotans. We need their help in preventing safe, accessible, and especially culturally responsive housing, healing, and supportive environments to prevent violence and treat survivors and all people with the healing and the justice that they need. As an elected official and those that you've seen here, we promise to continue to invest in a state where women, girls, and gender-expensive people are free from violence. We've made progress in the last 8 years, and I've been here at the Capitol, but we know that more resources are needed to serve survivors and protect our most vulnerable, and I can't do this without all of you and without all of these organizations. So I say Wopila Tonka, Chi Miigwech, Pinigigi again to all of you here today. None of us can do this alone, but when we gather our strengths, our skills, our knowledge, our talents, we become unstoppable. In the words of a Hunkpapa Lakota leader who led his people during years of resistance against the United States government's devastating policies, Sitting Bull, he said, "Let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children." So in the work that we do, let's keep the children at heart and continue to do this work in the best way. Please take care of each and every one of you. Chi Miigwech.
Bushu Nintanoe Maganang, Nicole Matthew Jaganashimung, Maniduba Neshi Kwe and Dago, Migazian Do Dame, Gawa Babaganakag in Dunjaba. Greetings, relatives. My English name is Nicole Matthews. My native name means Spirit Bird Woman. I'm Eagle Clan, and my family's from the White Earth Band of Ojibwe. I'm the CEO of the Minnesota Indian Women Sexual Assault Coalition, one of the state coalitions that is here to say we have your backs, right? There's a lot of attacks on our communities, on survivors, on our LGBTQ relatives, on our trans relatives, and we're not turning our backs on anybody. I have spent the last 2+ weeks, right? Like feeling hit after hit after hit, where you're tired and you want to cry and you're scared and you don't know what to say and we're fearful of saying anything, right? And I'm done with that. We're putting that aside, right? We're ready to move. We're ready to keep pushing. We're ready to stand up for all of our relatives. We're ready to keep pushing for funding. We're ready for Minnesota to take a stand to provide stable, ongoing funding for our victim services. I think when I look around the country, we're really fortunate to look at what Minnesota has done, right? And we can continue to be a leader. Minnesota can continue to be a leader to address gender-based violence, but they have to put the investment in. We have to invest in our communities, in our people, and those that are most marginalized. And we have to move out of fear to action. And I just want to say, can we get all the coalition directors up? We are all fighting. We are all fighting for you. We are all fighting for us. We are meeting constantly to strategize, to come up with solutions, to push on our legislators, and we need all of you to do the same. To call your state representatives, your senators, your federal representatives, call them. Let all your congresspeople know that we need action and we need them to stand up, right? I've seen a few people that are speaking. We need all of them to stand up. So I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for the hard work you do in communities, for all the work you do for our survivors, for those of you who are standing up, who are doing so with very little funding, right? We make do with very little. Thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing in community. Thank you for the survivors who are showing up day after day to tell our legislators it's not good enough. We can do better, and we can do better. Together, I know that we will get through this together because there's more of us than there are of them, and I know we will get through this. Chimigwech.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a little bit short, so I had to adjust this. Can you hear me okay? All right, hello everyone. My name is Pahua Vang. I am the Interim Operations Director over at MNCASA, the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Just want to share a few remarks that people have already been emphasizing too, that victim survivors and advocacy services for victim survivors is a crucial part of public safety. In 2003, a little over 20 years ago, there were 26 standalone rape crisis centers in Minnesota. And today, there are only 7. Many have had to close their doors or merge with other programs. And although other aspects of public safety may also have budgetary stress over the years, they don't have to worry about shutting down completely the way that advocacy does. So in no other public safety responses do we expect volunteers to be answering 911 calls. But that person you called on the crisis line might be a volunteer. We don't expect volunteer doctors or nurses to show up in the hospital in the middle of the night for a sexual assault exam, but that advocate might be a volunteer. That support group facilitator might also be a volunteer. Advocacy experiences such high turnover, especially with volunteers, but this is just one of the things our members have to deal with when we don't have enough funding. Last year, MNCASA asked over 60 member programs, are you fully staffed? If not, how many FTEs are you short? How is this shortage affecting your service provision? At least 21 of our programs responded to this question, and all the respondents indicated no. They said, we are not fully funded. We are short 4 FTE. Being short-staffed has significant impact on the quality and availability of its services by increasing the workload, difficulty meeting client needs, increased stress for employees, limited available services to clients. Nope. We have a large staff, but we are down 10 to 15%. In some programs, we have had to ask our sibling organizations to help us with capacity. We are having to scale back our services. No, we are currently a staff team of 2 with a third person being grant funded that is set to expire in 1 year. No, 6 advocates short. This is causing burnout for some of us. No, we are not fully staffed. We are down a minimum of 8 FTEs. Our shelter services are operating at limited capacity, affecting our intake process. We cannot write HROs and OFPs at the rate they come in. Participants are experiencing longer wait times for group and therapy services. We are not fully staffed, which significantly affects our ability to provide services and makes it challenging to meet the community demand. No, 2 short FTEs. Dramatically reduced programming and services. We are short-staffed. Some positions have been closed due to lack of funding. We are currently short 4 FTE. This is stretching the current staff who are here. We're unable to provide the level of service we usually do to our counties. We had to lay off 3 positions. This has caused our response time to return calls to callers to be longer. So, why do we say that this work is important to public safety, but then expect our nonprofits to go fundraise for themselves when they're already at capacity, apply for grants that are already limited, and later be told that these grants are going away? We need long-term sustainable funding, and we need Minnesota to invest in the needs of survivors in our state. So for all the advocates out there, when you meet with your legislators, tell them how you had to stop running that support group and what it meant to the victim survivors. Tell them how you had to refer survivors to other agencies when you didn't have the resources. Tell them how you supported the victim survivor through every step of the criminal justice process, and even when the outcome wasn't what the victim wanted, they were grateful for you, knowing they wouldn't have made it this far without you. This work matters. It is what has made all the successes of healing possible for so many survivors. For victim survivors, your voice and your story is yours. You get to choose if, when, how, and with whom you want to share that with. Whether or not you choose to speak, know that you are powerful in all of your own ways. Know that your voice matters, and know that you're not alone. For our legislators, we are asking for long-term sustainable funding. As elected officials, know that there are survivors in your district and advocacy programs that serve your district. And when you make your decisions, it will impact not just the victim survivors, but the culture of our overall society. Thank you.
Hello, Minnesota! Right on! I'm so happy to see you this year. I was so happy to see you last year, but I'm happy. So, have you been doing chants? Because I swear I was downstairs, I didn't hear no chants. All right, so when I say, who do we invest in? You say survivors. Ready? Who do we invest in? Survivors! Who do we invest in? Survivors! Who do we invest in? Survivors! That's right. I'm Guadalupe Lopez from Violence Free. Miigwech.
Come on, Natasha. I brought Natasha Kingboard with me, part of Mending the Sacred Hoop. We cannot do any of this work alone. It will only be effective as long as we are working together. And I seen a sign earlier up here. It says, change happens here. Let's change it. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Padamia. Drive safely.